YouTube, what it do? It's your guy CJ back with another video, back with another episode of the CJWilkins YouTube channel. I want to have a conversation with y'all today about the importance of starting over. A lot of times in life, man, when people have a setback or, someone may fall off or, someone may have you may go through like a losing season, and that's normal. Like that's to be expected, right? Because in the good book, the Lord tells us we will come to know trial and tribulation, but worry not because I've overcome the world, so it's to be assumed that you're going to encourage some type of a setback, minor or major. You're gonna fall down sometimes in life, You're gonna go through losses and you will be defeated at times, But I'm not here to preach a Bible verse to you all, The Bible is readily available, and my channel it's not solely a faith channel, even though I do speak a lot about faith and I talk about God and I call God by name. I don't call him the universe or things like that, But I want to give you all courage today. Anyone who may be listening to this episode and they're going through trial and tribulation, somebody who's going through a season of judgment, anyone who's going through a season of what may feel like failure, anyone who is going through a rough season right now, and you may be going through a time in your life where you feel like, okay, this is something that's going to completely take me out and I'm going to have to start over, right? I want you to know and I want you to feel encouraged by the fact that there's nothing wrong with starting over in life. There's absolutely, positively nothing wrong with having to start over. And I'm going to tell you the most terrifying thing about the prospect of having to start over. And I can say this from experience, right? This ain't no shit no one told me. This ain't no shit I heard through the grapevine. This is nothing I read. This is something I went through, right? So I'm speaking from a place of experience on this, right? The scariest thing about starting over, or at least the perception of it, is that you believe that you're starting over from zero. You think you're starting over from scratch, That's a scary thing, Especially when you're older or you're experienced or you've been through things in your life to where, like, you may think like, man, I'm too old to be like, starting over. Like, I know people who lost their jobs, like good paying, like salaried career positions, and they have the mindset on getting back on the job market. Like, I'm not going to take a job for $20 an hour. I'm not going to take a job for $15 an hour. I used to make $100,000, $200,000. So, like, I'm not going to take a job that is quote unquote, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's such a downgrade pay wise. They look at it like they're starting over from zero. You know what I'm saying? But what I want you to understand, like what I want you to know, like regardless of where you're starting over from, you're never starting over from zero. Excuse me. Yeah, you're never starting over from zero. And I don't know if you need to hear this, someone may need to hear this. Share this video, man. You're never starting over from zero. Whatever experience you have in this world is valuable and it's important, right? So if you're older, if you're not older, you know what I mean? Like, you have experience in this world. Now, like, of course, the older you are, the more life experience you have, the more relationship or marriage experience, the more life experience, the more professional, the more work experience you may have, But never fear starting over, because you're starting over from a position of experience. You're starting over from a position of having been through things in this life. And whether you know or whether no one has ever told you this before, that's valuable. Like, that's important. that means something, you know, that you are starting from a position of power, right? You're actually starting from a position of power. And your power is what you've been through. Your power is your knowledge base. Your power is your Rolodex of connections, if you have one. Your power is the perspective you have because you've overcome things before in this world, right? This ain't the first time you've been through like a storm, you know? Most people, you have been through multiple storms in your life. You may have gone through things in your life that you may have thought at one time or another was going to take you out. And here you are, you're still here. Still strong, still handsome, you know. You're still confident, you're still glowing, you know. Still feeling good, looking good, moving good, you know. You're blessed, you know. You're blessed. And because you have overcome things that in the past were sent to make you depressed, make you feel bad about yourself, make you feel less than the child of God that you are, right? Because you survived those things, you don't give yourself credit for that. A lot of people don't give themselves credit for the trials they've defeated, for the tribulation they've manhandled, you know? And you got to give yourself credit for that. Men, women, boys, girls, you know, whoever is listening to the sound of my voice right now, give yourself credit for being a testimony, like being a living, walking, breathing testimony of God's grace, mercy, and glory, you know? Because sometimes I hear people say, man, I wasn't supposed to be here, you know? And they're giving credence to what they've been through. They're talking about their past. They're talking about, you know, the days where it was just dark and cold and lonely, man, and it wasn't looking good, right? And I've been there before. I've been in that position, man, where like it looked like everything was against me. My back was against the wall. I couldn't see in front of me. Everything around me was crumbling, you know. I've been at rock bottom at least twice in my life. And I always tell people, if you haven't been to rock bottom yet, you really haven't started living, you know. There's something so beautiful, something so infinitely profound about that climb back in life. Anytime you hit rock bottom, you falling off, you know, when you have to do that climb back to get to where you were, or in most cases, I'll say for me, in both times in my life when I hit rock bottom, both times, whenever I got back up and started back climbing, I actually climbed further than I actually fell from originally. So I actually was able to rebuild myself, right? I was actually able to come back better, bigger, stronger, faster, smarter, wiser, you know? Right? Because that rock bottom, what rock bottom does, right? What the struggle does, what falling flat on your face and, you know, the world is laughing at you, or, you know, you may have a goal or a target, you know, and you miss it, you know? You can actually bet on yourself in life and not be victorious in it, you know? And that happens, right? But when that happens, something else is going on behind the scenes that we're not seeing, you know? A lot of times when you bet on yourself and you lose, or you go through some type of, you know, adversity, right? You're actually being molded. You're being reshaped. You're being like molded into something greater, right? Because you didn't just lose, you didn't just fail, you didn't just fall down, you didn't just get humiliated, you didn't just, you know, get fired or laid off or got divorced or got dumped, or, you know, someone you really cared about showed you they really didn't care about you. Like, you really didn't go through that for nothing, you know. You went through the fire of life. And the fire of life is going to make you better, meaning it's going to make you, or it's going to drive you absolutely batshit crazy, and you're going to lose your mind, and you're going to just throw it all away, and you're going to give up, and you're either going to self-delete, cut your wrist, or you're going to end up on Skid Row or like in a tent city for the rest of your life. Because it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of pride. It takes a lot of self-dignity. It takes a lot of self-love, self-respect to go through things in life that are tough and difficult and get back up and keep climbing and keep striving and keep fighting. We applaud the champions and the people who overcome and the people who endure, but we never really sit back and think about how much courage, how much balls, how like the nuts it takes, the cojones it takes, the level of the God level testosterone it takes to fight back from when you were down in a series 0-3 and it's a 7-game series, and if you lose that 4th game you got swept, but you fight back, you take it one game at a time. Game 4 win, game 5 win, game 6 win, now it's tied 3-3, and you come back game 7 and you put your foot up their ass. People don't get credit for that, and I'm not someone here to say you should get credit for that. I'm not saying you should get a Nobel Peace Prize for being victorious in life. But I will say I have a great amount of admiration and respect for people who have fought in life. And, they didn't have a great support unit. They didn't come from the best family or the best neighborhood or the best community or the best background, But they still fought. They still pulled up their sleeves and they scratched, they clawed, they punched, they kicked, they bit, they picked up something to help them, They did whatever they had to do to win that fight, and they're still here because of it. And if you're listening to this at this point, you're one of those people, I don't care the level of severity of your trial or your tribulation. It's still important. It matters. It's very valid, And you should give yourself credit because it's hard to fight, man, to push on, especially like in the moment too, because I'm talking about my rock bottoms in hindsight, right? And, in hindsight it's always 50-50, as they say. But, in the moment, the difference between life and death sometimes when it comes to that is being able to have the courage to start over. You've been at this job for 10, 20 years and you get laid off, you get fired, You've been in this, this relationship for a few years, or you've been married for a few years, few decades, and you wake up and your wife or your husband is feeling different one day and they say, hey, I don't want to do this anymore, Granted, the writing could have been on the wall. Some people have discernment. Some people don't have discernment, so they don't know these things. Some people are really blindsided by these things, Because sometimes you don't know. Like, sometimes you had no warning. You couldn't have, foreseen, what eventually came, So when that happens, you have to be willing to start over, Because now your life is different. You no longer have that corner office. You no longer have that spouse, or whatever form of loss it was, Anytime you have a great loss, you have to start over, But don't look at it because you're without that person or without that title or without that thing. Don't think you're starting from zero, man. You're starting from power. And when you start from power, you have an advantage. You have an advantage to now go carve out the life you really want. To carve out. And even if you had a life you wanted, guess what? Now you get to go carve it out again. But this time, because you have that experience, you have that wisdom, you get to carve out a better life. You get to carve it out better. You get to make it smoother, more pure, more pristine, You get to carve it out the way that you want it to be. So always have that in mind. Always think about you get to really rebuild your life from a position of power now. You thought you found your Prince Charming ladies and it didn't work out the way you wanted it to, or fellas, you really climbed and scrapped and clawed your way up the corporate ladder and you find out, we don't need your services anymore. And right now, in this economy right now, a lot of people are losing jobs. And the thing about this economy, I'm going to tell you, especially the job market, unless you've been under a rock or you're out of the way to where you don't really know or pay attention or don't care about these things that are affecting millions of people. And I won't make this political right now, but I do want to make a point. Good jobs aren't just growing on trees right now. In this economy, in this job market where, administrations are not really truthful about how many people don't have a job versus how many companies are hiring versus who's looking for work right now, right? Good jobs, high-paying jobs are not growing on trees. So as a result of that, now you have people accepting jobs and taking jobs that they may not have taken a few years ago, And I'm not here to say it's neither a good thing or a bad thing, whether, what type of job a person has to take. But the world is changing drastically, right? But regardless of that, if you are someone are in a position where they have to start over, look at it with grace and look at it as an opportunity to create and carve out the life and the existence you want, right? I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for rocking with me and supporting my channel. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, CJWilkins YouTube channel. I'm CJ, and as always, I'm out. Peace.